All right, welcome to my round 5 recap from Vegas. I just finished about 15 minutes ago, so yeah, no time to shave or eat. The recap must come first. In this one, I was playing against Noah Ward, who is a pretty young player, maybe 13 or 14 years old, but has gained a lot of rating recently. And I decided to play pawn c4 on move 1. So repeating the English opening that I played a couple of rounds ago. And he played the move c6, which I was expecting. I found a few of his games in the database. I also found his chess.com account, so I was just sifting through all his opening lines before the game, and I saw that he's a Slav player. So if I play d4 or start with d4 on move 1, he'd play d5, and this is one of his main openings as black. So one of the reasons I played c4 is that after he plays c6, I don't have to go into a Slav. I can go into what's called a Panov Bofanik Caro-Kann. And this is one of the benefits of playing the English opening, is there's certain lines for black that black can't quite achieve because of the English move order. So yeah, black can't transpose into a Slav, and he goes for d5. I take, take, take. And this is a line that I played in... Where did I play it? I played it in Reykjavik. Except in Reykjavik, I took here and then played d4, I think. And my opponent made the mistake of taking too early. Should have played knight f6. But the lines are very similar, because very often white will end up with an isolated queen's pawn, which is what happens right away in this game. Now, eventually, black will win back the pawn, and my opponent played the most accurate move, knight f6. It doesn't make sense to take right away and allow knight c3 with tempo. So this is still theory. I play knight c3, he takes, and I play knight to f3. And it does look a little bit strange to delay pawn d4, but I was actually following a Carlsen Smates game from years ago. Carlsen won like a really nice game over GM Smates, where he delayed d4, and I think that game went knight c6, bishop b5, e6, castle, bishop e7, and then d4. Something like this, but one of the points is white completes development first, and then only later plays pawn d4. So going back, our game followed a slightly different route. Now, knight c6 and bishop b5 did happen, but instead of playing e6, which is the most common move, my opponent played g6, which I was only slightly prepared for. Like, I knew the next few moves as white, but I didn't look at this line super closely during the game. And I believe my opponent only had 1 or 2 games on his chess.com account from this position, and I think one of the games went knight c7. He may have had a game with e6 as well, but g6 was a small surprise. Now, I have encountered this move maybe online and once in a tournament like years ago, and I was prepared with queen a4, which is the main line, pressuring the knight on c6, and knight is pinned, and it's a little bit awkward for black because bishop d7 would obstruct the queen from defending the knight and just blunder a knight. So it's not that easy for black to actually deal with the threat of bishop takes c6. And it turns out the main line here is knight b6 to sacrifice a pawn, and after takes, bishop d7, queen e4, I would have been okay entering this position. I think the engine gives a small edge for white with the extra pawn, but black definitely has compensation with the bishop pair and a pretty open position, and black can play against the isolated queen's pawn. So our game didn't go that route because instead of knight b6, my opponent played queen to d6. And he played this move relatively quickly. And at this point, I'm completely out of prep. This is a new position for me. And I didn't know if this is like a theoretical move, or maybe my opponent just got careless and thought maybe it's only move to defend. But I do have the database open. This has been played about a dozen times in master level play, so we're still in some theory. But during the game, I thought this move is very questionable for black because it gives white an opportunity to seize initiative right away. And I played the move knight e4, and now the queen is attacked, and it's tied down to defending the knight, and black is essentially forced to play queen e6 here. And I thought it's already a great success, chasing the queen to a square where it blocks e-pawn and the light squared bishop. But I realized it's not so simple to get much of a clear edge because, first of all, the knight's pinned, and I really want to play knight d4, but that would obstruct my queen from defending my knight and allow queen takes e4. So for that reason, I play pawn d3 first, just a flexible move, defending the knight. And now I'm threatening to play knight d4 to hit the queen and the knight. And just, yeah, if black's not careful, it would be a winning position. So here, my opponent took a long time. We can see he played pretty quickly in the opening, only using a few minutes. But he took over 20 minutes to play his next move, pawn a6. And it's an interesting move because he's not actually threatening to take the bishop due to the pin, but he is preventing my threat of knight d4, because if I play knight d4, then he can take, and in the end, after takes, black's doing very well, getting 2 pieces for the rook. So in some sense, a6 was a prophylactic move, like preventing knight d4, because it doesn't work tactically. But it's also a useful move because there's many cases where I will have to address the fact that my bishop is attacked by the pawn, and now my queen is tied down to pinning the pawn to the rook. So again, I took a lot of time here because I do have options. I can castle, I can hit the queen with knight g5, and ultimately I decided to attack the queen with knight g5, and it's forced to move back to d7. So it looks a little bit awkward still because there's a lot of pins in the position. The pawn is pinned and the knight is pinned. And originally when I played knight g5, I wanted to play knight c5 in this position. But then I realized that I'm just chasing the queen to a more useful square where it's no longer in the way of the pieces. And it seems like white has good initiative, but I couldn't quite make this work. Like, I wanted to play queen d4 attacking the knight and the rook, but I think there's some problems like knight f6 and, or maybe even queen a5 check first. I'm not sure about this line. Maybe there's some other options for black as well. So after a long think, I decided to castle, and I burned a lot of time on the last few moves. I'm down about 10 minutes on the clock. And then here, my opponent took a long think and ended up playing a move which I think was a key mistake. Now, during my opponent's time, I was trying to calculate, and the move I was most scared of, which he didn't play, was just bishop g7. And I didn't really see what to do after this. Like, I wanted to play this, but then he has queen d6 hitting the knight, and I didn't see any way to keep an edge, like knight e4, queen c7, and it just seems like my initiative is fizzling out and black's ready to castle. And if I have to take, then I can see the bishop pair. On top of that, I have the isolated d-pawn. So I was thankful that my opponent didn't play bishop g7, but rather played the move knight to b6. And at first, this move actually looks fine for black because it's an attempt to just relieve all the pressure and essentially force matters, because now my queen is attacked. And there's some interesting lines. Like, originally, I wanted to play queen b3 and essentially sacrifice the bishop and take on f7. And if we were to enter this line, I don't know what's going on. And I spent a bit of time trying to make sense of this position. But I didn't end up going for this because I just saw a much more clear and strong option. I ended up going for bishop takes c6. And at first, this move doesn't seem to achieve much because we do trade queens. Knight takes a4 was played. Take on d7, take on d7. And we get to a position where it looks like black has survived the worst of the storm. Like, queens are traded. I no longer have any pressure on the queen side, and black has a bishop pair and better pawn structure. But what my opponent had overlooked was the fact that I have a temporary advantage due to more activity, and I can make use of my more active pieces in a really interesting manner. And when I played my next move, my opponent I think, immediately realized that he's in trouble. So if you haven't seen the game and want to pause the video and find a very strong move for white, feel free to do so. And it's interesting because this position, it doesn't seem like black should be in much danger, but the move is rook to e1. And the powerful thing about this move is I'm threatening knight d6 check and knight f6 check. And it's really not easy for black to prevent both of these threats. But if you give black an extra move to play bishop g7 and castle, then black should be doing fine. But there's really no time to escape the trouble. And my opponent took, I think, about 20 minutes to play the next move. And I was actually surprised with the next move because he castled queenside, just walking into a fork. I was more expecting bishop e6, which at least tries to cut the losses as much as possible for black. Now, of course, white is doing well here. I can take and then play against the double e-pawns, and white is definitely for choice. But after casting queenside, it was just another gift, and I think it just kind of downward spiraled for my opponent after takes. He did try and fight and get counterplay, bishop g7, but then I keep the pressure. And actually in this moment, I reached out my hand about to take the rook on h8, and then I pulled back, realizing that I can just leave the rooks forked and decide later which rook to take. So I thought for a little bit more and played the move bishop g5. So now the pawn and both rooks are attacked. And here my opponent has nothing better than to capture the b2 pawn. He played bishop takes b2. I was actually expecting knight takes b2, but I think at this point it doesn't make too much of a difference. White is doing very well regardless. And after rook a b1, he plays bishop e6, which is an attempt to muddy the waters, hitting the knight and the pawn. And here I'm just trying to simplify the position. So I take the rook, he takes on a2, and then I take on b2 because I saw the line after takes, rook c1, king b8. I skewer the knight and the bishop. And yeah, black really doesn't have any time to take the knight on h8 because then I take on b2 and I'm up a clean piece. This would be winning. So he tried to get counterplay. He took on d3, saying, oh no, my knight. Of course, I didn't take the knight because checkmate is a threat. But here I have a really nice, just consolidating move, knight d2, which blocks a rook and essentially prevents black from defending the knight. So now I'm guaranteed to win the knight or the bishop. And after rook d8, I take the knight, hitting the bishop. He plays bishop d5, and then it looks like my knight is trapped, but I can save it with the maneuver bishop f4 check, king a7. I play bishop e3 check, king 8, and then bishop d4. And now I'm up two minor pieces, two knights for that matter, for two pawns. And at this point, it was just about cleaning up and making sure I didn't make any terrible mistake. So now we'll just zoom through and see how white converts this position. A lot of it was just making gradual improvements, making sure the pawns don't get too dangerous. And at some point, I give a check, I give another check, I win the pawn. And then finally, this knight has had enough of being in the corner, and I play knight f7. And very quickly, we're going to see the minor pieces coordinate after b5, knight d6, a3, rook b3. Yeah, black is now essentially losing one of the pawns, because if a2, I can check and win the pawn. So he plays b4, and after rook takes b4, a2. At this point, I am just looking for mating ideas, and the resulting mating net is actually really beautiful. I start with rook b6, so idea being that I want to check and win the pawn, and after he plays bishop e6, then there's a really cool forced mate, rook a6, king b8, knight d c8, king b7, and white to move, checkmate in one, rook a7. And actually at the end of the game, there was a small kid watching watching the final moves play out, and he was like laughing out loud because of the eventual mate. And I felt a little bit bad because usually spectators should not be chuckling at a game in progress. But it was a cool kind of mating idea that you don't see too often, like a king on b7. But the minor pieces coordinate really well because my knight defends the other knight, which defends a rook. The rook checks the king, the bishop plays a role, and these squares are also controlled. So nice finish to what I think was a pretty smooth game. Maybe it could have been more of a fight. I think the key moment in this game, if we go back to this position, yeah, knight b6 I think was just a big error. And I think it resulted from the fact that my opponent did not calculate a move further in this position, because if he saw rook e1 from a distance, maybe he would go for bishop g7 instead, which I think was a better option. So I think that does it for this recap. I am 3 out of 5. I'm not sure when this video will be uploaded, but friendly reminder to check out my Twitch channel for all the morning games. Jonathan Trantz is doing commentary. He's commentated 2 games so far, both of which I lost. So hopefully in the next one, I can bring a victory. But I think the goal for now is to get food and get sleep. So thanks for watching. I do appreciate all the positive comments and all the people watching, especially those who watch until the end of the video. So stay tuned for more, and I'll see you guys soon.